So first of all, I'd like to introduce Peter Duerden, who's an old hand at the Macquarie and is with Waratah, and has got some very exciting news to tell us about what's going on there. Anthony Harris, who's with Newmont, another old hand from the Newcrest days, in a new role now in global opportunities. So it'd be very interesting to hear his perspective of the ARC and relationship to what's going on around the world from a big company perspective. And then next along we have Sam Spring of Kincora, who've been drilling up at the Trundle area, but has other activities around New South Wales, and has been part of a very successful JV campaign with Anglo Ashanti Gold, so another interesting perspective. And at the end there we have Chris Byrne with Legacy Minerals, of course, who have done so much fundamental exploration, around the Timor Belt and elsewhere. If I could sort of start off first in terms of the questions, and I'll start with you, Anthony. We'll start with the big picture here, given your new position as Director of Global Exploration Opportunities. Apart from Cadia, and your past with Cadia, of course, what would sell a company like yours to the Macquarie, given that there is such increasing interest in exploration elsewhere around the world?
Is that not?
Yep.
So I suppose I'm in a fortunate position where Newmont as a company and previously Newcrest as a company own and operate the Cadia mine. 25 plus years of understanding the deposit has actually benefited Newcrest and subsequently Newmont in its global exploration activities. What I mean by that is that actually we were able to acquire in British Columbia, on the strength of understanding the Macquarie porphyries, similar lookalike porphyries in being red chris, and then subsequently the epithermals around Brisbane in British Columbia. What excites me still to this day in terms of a generative piece of Macquarie is that if you compare the two global analogues that we have, being in British Columbia and here in the Macquarie there's a discrepancy, and the discrepancy is this, that actually there's a lot more porphyries up and along the arc chain of British Columbia that shows more variance. We in New South Wales are rather fixated or stymied into looking for 440 million year old porphyries.
Yep.
And that's the exclusion of looking at other magmatic events that we actually see in the Macquarie Arc. So what I'm intrigued by is the fact that actually Cadia alone represents 55 million ounces of gold endowment. It has a thermal footprint that's probably 7 kilometres long of the Earth's crust. There's significant metal endowment. There has to be more, and the thing is that in the Macquarie Arc is that there's a unique position to actually go underneath sin mineral cover, and that's the opportunity, and Pete's project actually is exemplifying that opportunity.
Right. I'll just stay with you for a tick, because there's a lot of places in the Macquarie Arc where there's been a lot of smoke for many years, Commonwealth, Kaiser, Cargo and that kind of thing, but we're seeing genuine fires there now through that smoke in terms of the Waratah discovery and at Spur, of course. What does that say about the exploration opportunities in the Macquarie Arc? Shadow of the head frame or camp scale, or is there plenty of stuff in brownfields areas still to be looked at?
I absolutely agree, Phil. I think actually Richard's data actually shows quite nicely that actually a lot of the big discoveries are still made in the shadow of the head frame. So investment actually is best suited around the shadow of the head frame. Interestingly enough, there's a lot of deep drilling that's been done on these prospects in New South Wales, as we know. And that was done through the 90s. Was the discovery of Cadia and Ridgeway in particular, sitting 500 metres below the surface. It's benign to the surface, so it doesn't have any obvious geology expression through that 500 metres of cover. The significance of that, it drove a lot of deep exploration. That almost got forgotten about. And so there's these big metal plumes that have actually never been fully explored. And we see this in British Columbia as much as we see it here in New South Wales. A lot of the open pitable depths have actually been explored, but the deep potential of a lot of these districts haven't been. And I suppose what I'm excited by is that there's still to this day, being Boda, Spur project, there's these big metal plumes that are actually offering up future exploration activity. And if we come back to the fact that actually there is an exploration search space in the Macquarie Arc that actually does go underneath cover.
Yep.
So I think the fact that we have significant metal endowments, these aren't trivial deposits that we're talking about, and some of the, at least in the Cadia districts, they're some of the highest grade porphyries on the planet that actually are known, being Ridgeway, for example. There's not too many porphyries with single metre intercepts of 35 grams on the planet lying around like they do in New South Wales.
Yeah. Okay, thanks for that. I'll bring you in now, Peter. You're a seasoned hand in the Macquarie Arc, and so is Cargo. Everyone's been there, done that sort of thing. It takes a lot of courage and optimism to go back into a system like that, which has resulted in the Spur discovery, of course. What attracted you to that, to the Cargo system?
Yeah, sure. And just reiterating what Anthony was saying, you're seeing great potential there. It's not just undercover. The Spur discovery demonstrates it's not an undercover opportunity. This is outcropping. This is a reinterpretation of what's important in those intrusive complexes. It's sort of targeting, very specifically off the shoulders of the early stage intrusive complex there, where you saw, gold mines at surface that hadn't been focused on in the past. We utilised the great resources from the Geological Survey, Londonderry Core Library, to investigate more closely in terms of what we thought the significance of that was. It showed us very quickly that it showed all the signs you want to see if you're looking for an East Lachlan hydrothermal system. As Anthony was saying, there's a spectrum of mineral system types that are probably poorly represented if you look at the Macquarie Arc versus other porphyry belts in the world. And I think you've seen the emergence of more epithermal style gold, the advances being made by evolution at Cal, turning that from 3 to plus 14 million ounce gold system in the last decade. So clearly there's more work to be done. I've liked the Cargo complex for a long time. You could see that the focus there historically hadn't been in the priority search space. If you look at all the East Lachlan systems, the margins of these big magnetic intrusive complexes is where you want to be. All the big deposits are located there. So that search space at Cargo, at surface, hadn't been explored thoroughly enough, we thought. So hence we're there, and we're very focused as a company on that.
Right. That's an interesting point. So how much of the discovery was due to the fact that you had a very experienced team with have done a lot of work in the Macquarie Arc and have a good understanding of these deposits? Does there continue to be a role for that sort of geologist in the discovery that has done their time in a belt and has had enough time to really get to grips with the idiosyncrasies of each of these provinces?
Yeah, certainly. You fail a lot of times as an explorer. You fail a lot, and if you keep doing that with different companies, you end up understanding what the key controls are. But the fact of the matter at Cargo, as a junior explorer, we liked the opportunity just to drill shallow gold. We saw the opportunity to build a story around that. The good technical approach, which stems back, the team and myself, exploring the Macquarie Arc, with different companies for the last 18 years.
Yeah.
I like that comment. But, certainly, I think it's really underrated generally with explorers. Look for geologists there that have failed a lot of times, and they've been able to work out what the key controls on mineralisation are.
Right. Takes a sympathetic board.
Yeah, it's very important. A board that's aligned. Totally, very technically oriented, very very strong discovery pedigree. The board really understands what it takes, and where the value is coming from. Yeah.
Sam, I'll bring you in now. What excites you about Trundle?
Yeah, and I guess Anthony and Pete have set the scene pretty well, as well as yourself earlier, that there's a lot of known geoscience in New South Wales, and these new concepts, this new research, it's really leveraging the amount of data that's already there. And Scott Halley puts it very well, that a lot of the new discoveries probably in the Macquarie Arc are already there. They're in the data, people have just got to uncover them. Trundle we really liked because we had some new concepts similar to what Pete's brought to Cargo. We've drilled 27,000 metres of drilling at Trundle, found the biggest mineralised skarn in New South Wales, made a couple of other discoveries. But the challenge for a junior explorer is, how do you keep funding that? How do you get a return profile for your shareholders? We put $1 million into Trundle in 2023, got some pretty good results, but it didn't move the needle. Technically, it didn't move the needle from our share price. So we changed our funding model, looking to bring in asset level partners, and that's what we're doing at the moment. We've drilled 11,000 metres in the last year with Anglo Gold Ashanti, looking in the northern extension of the Junee Narromine Belt, the covered extensions of the Macquarie Arc, looking for really a new province, a new district. If you put that scale into perspective, it's twice the size of what the Vicuña district is, which is an emerging discovery up in the central Andes in Argentina. So Trundle we're very excited about, and we want to come back to, and similar to our Fairholme project, there's a lot of smoke there. There's a lot of very good new geological ideas, but it's the amount of funding needed to really give those projects the next level of metres and test those concepts. And that's what we're looking to do at Trundle and Fairholme, is bring those right partners in. To date, we've done 5 asset level deals that have unlocked potentially 100 million of partner funding. We've seen 6.5 million go into the ground in the first 9 months of that strategy. So we're very keen to come back and do Trundle justice, but it's just trying to find the right funding mechanism to do it, because they're great prizes, but they take time and they take money.
Yeah, and Kincora is extending the love into the Southern Cobar Basin as well with the Duerden mineral field. Is that based on learnings or possibilities of similar sorts of Macquarie Arc type deposits associated with a system like Duerden, which has a bit of a magmatic smell about it, or was that just an opportunity?
Well, I think Condo or Canoban's probably a project you don't want to put a geological model over at the moment. It's got a few different flavours in it, but it is a historical mineral field. It produced a lot of gold, silver based metals. It's a project that a junior can add value to without needing a partner in terms of near surface. We've consolidated the historical mineral field. We're just finishing an airborne survey today. We'll go in and drill a new discovery that was made the last phase of proper systematic exploration, and there's been very little exploration that's been done at that project in modern times under the weathering profile. And you have a look at that whole Cobar Basin, there's been a number of very good discoveries over the last decade following up very similar mineral systems that were just sitting there and were underexplored. And the nice thing about the Cobar Basin from a junior explorer's perspective is there's a number of excess mills, and one of the lead time to the chart that Richard put up before of the lead time for new copper supply coming on stream is permitting and building mills. If there's excess capacity there and there's like-minded people that can share existing mills to get them filled with third-party ore, that's a pretty interesting proposition and something that we think our Condobolin project offers. So we're really excited about this airborne survey, looking at the regional potential and then following up a new discovery that was made last commodity cycle but just hasn't been followed up due to funding.
Yeah, that's great. Chris, I see that, how should I put it? If you talk about smoke in certain areas of the Macquarie Arc, there's no more smoke than in that Tamora belt and the Ballura area that you guys have been working on. It's just extraordinary, the extent of the geochemical anomalies, the fascinating alteration and epithermal textures and things that you guys have been working there, and I see that you're back in there now. What plans do you have for Ballura going forward?
Ballura is a project that we pegged as free ground, I think about 3 years ago. And one of the things that we really saw in the Macquarie Arc is that there has been a huge focus on chasing the big porphyries, and that sort of left a bit of a void, which represented an opportunity that we saw for some of these more unknown areas, maybe not as well liked geologically. So that's in the Silurian, and that, that concept also applies a bit, to the broader New South Wales exploration space with the Thompson Origin and the New England as well. That that everyone's drawn to the Macquarie Arc. A lot of funding comes in, and then you can sort of bring players into that space and then leverage that expertise and funding for some of these other projects. And we're really quite excited when we signed Newmont on as a partner on that project. I think just over 2 years ago. Recognition of an underlooked sort of epithermal low sulfidation system. We've now got that project 100% back in the portfolio. We're looking to continue on with the work that we've done down there with Newmont over the past couple of years. But it is relatively, I guess, early staged in its concepts. That hasn't had a lot of, understandings of these types of systems, these, preserved sinter-related lithology, in that Silurian Devonian age. So, there's a lot of work to get done on it. As you said, there's a lot of smoke, and the footprint is quite significant. I think the latest round of geochemistry and sampling that we've done down there, even over the last couple of months, has doubled sort of the size of the known, vein-filled footprint. So we're quite excited about, some of the developments that will be coming out of that project.
And you guys are in the Rocky Golgong belt now, the most easterly belt of the Macquarie Arc. It's sometimes been a bit unloved in terms of exploration interest and stuff. It's something that I've always been very keen to get in there and sort out from a geological point of view to really understand its true age. We know there's major issues. All the limestones in that belt have slid in, so they're not giving us proper ages and geochemistry there. But from an exploration point of view, what has drawn you to the Rocky Golgong belt? There is potential there with shear-hosted gold, and there's the Racecourse Creek assess them as well. But what opportunity did you follow up on there?
Yeah, we really like the Rocky Golgong belt, again, because it's extremely overlooked. When you look at a lot of the expenditure, it's sunk into the Molong, and rightfully so. It's where some of those big porphyries are. But there is the Bushranger porphyry that you mentioned, Phil. That's 500-700 million tonnes, I think, around that sort of figure, which would place it in the top 5 biggest sort of deposits within New South Wales, sitting in the Rocky Golgong belt. The probability that there's not another porphyry kicking around there, we think, is probably unlikely. It just hasn't seen that systematic exploration that the other belts have. But we think that's changing. Alkane are fairly active in that region. Goldfields have recently joint ventured with a private company there as well, and we're looking to continue our exploration plans there. Generating those targets. We think that could be another space in New South Wales that delivers hopefully a few discoveries over the next couple of years.
Right. I'll come back to you, Anthony. When I was at uni, we had these porphyry copper models that had epithermals, that had skarns. There were even VHMS little things off to the side. Also, from a geochemical point of view, the Macquarie Arc, it's very alkaline in part, but there's no undersaturated magnetism. It's clearly been identified which contrasts with British Columbia, the Sunda Arc, and other areas around the place. Is it just that we're not looking for the right things, or there is a paleogeographic preservation factor involved in these things? In part of the Critical Minerals Exploration Program announcement that was made on Monday, one of the grants was to Alkane to put a hole beneath Peak Hill to look for prospective porphyry copper at depth there. But is this 440 fixation that you mentioned before coloured our views about what to actually look for and what variety of deposit styles we might have in the arc?
Yeah, I think, Phil, it's kind of, to have that global perspective is actually really important, because if you step up into British Columbia geologists routinely say we want to find a Galore Creek, because a Galore Creek is actually, it's a silica undersaturated, it's stuffed full of carbonate, it's very high grade, it's very much like our Ridgeway system, which contrasts it in terms of Ridgeway being a silica saturated end member of an alkalic porphyry. Our porphyries aren't really true alkalic, but that aside, it's semantics. the thing is that they are associated with phenomenal grades. And so actually what affords us here in New South Wales is actually to do the diligent science that actually shows why these things do actually have materially high grade. And what's really interesting, if we look at, as porphyry geologists, we're stuck in a textbook example of a porphyry system. Macquarie Arc, actually, most of the porphyries are actually accreted or part of the accretion of the Arc post-docking against the Gondwana Craton. And what I mean by that is that actually they're post-orogenic porphyries. They've got, the Arc was already there. What's that really important for that is that it opens up an exploration search space. So where we atypically have looked for porphyries up and down the Macquarie Arc, there's nothing to preclude that they actually don't go inboard into things like the Cobar Basin. Because if you then look for analogues elsewhere in the world, China for example, you actually still see the same thing along the Red River Fault Zone, where you see post-orogenic porphyries emplaced along large geographical displacements. In terms of preservation, that's the biggest thing. So the biggest impediment to exploration, further exploration in the Macquarie Arc is that there's exploring in known smoke, that's one thing. The other thing too is the extent of cover. So the realisation, and that's what's really exciting about Phil's and his team's work in looking at the Silurian cover sequences through New South Wales, the fossil ages are actually really important. Newcrest was really lucky as a company that we worked with the Geological Survey probably near on 15 years ago, where we actually did very precise fossil dating across the Cadia district. What we actually found is that cover sequence across the top of Cadia East, which is 70% obscured. So 70% of the biggest porphyry in the Macquarie Arc is actually sitting underneath an early Silurian cover. That cover actually was deposited about 1 million years after it was exhumed and eroded. So if you go and look for where those rocks occur, they often occur around known porphyry districts in the Macquarie Arc. So there's this thing about cover that we haven't yet got our head around, and I call out the Cotton Formation, for example, adjacent to North Parks. That is time equivalent to mineralisation in North Parks. We ignore all that sandstone. So we don't actually proactively explore through that cover sequence. And so there's cover, which is what everybody understands, but there's a syn mineral cover. And what's really unusual about these Macquarie Arc is that they either don't have an upflow zone that is traditional in a textbook example, so they don't have lithocaps that are traditionally documented. We have Peak Hill, for example, which is an upflow zone, but it may or may not be related to a porphyry system. Nash Hill sits adjacent to the alkalic porphyries, but if you go across the top of Cadia East, there is no lithocap evidence at all. Yep. So very different. So the exploration models here that we require for New South Wales are very different to British Columbia, but they're very different to a textbook example of a porphyry system.
I'd just like to get some comments from the panel. We're very fortunate in the Macquarie Arc in that we have such an excellent investment by University of Tasmania through CODES in terms of research at the deposit scale and a broader understanding. What do you guys think that the survey can do, or the government can do, to assist in that regional, or can to regional scale to assist you with exploration targeting? And open to anyone who'd like to.
Down the line.
The 2 bobs worth?
Yeah, my 2 bobs. I think, well, Anthony was saying, it's clear that a big chunk of that Cadia mineralisation's under that Landovery age sequence. So, basically we want the survey to show us where that is throughout New South Wales, so we can drill underneath it and explore it. So it's just that, I guess, the stuff that we can't do, the detail around the paleontology piece. I think that'd be a powerful data set to improve on. And then the geochem piece, geochem technology's come a long way. You hear a lot about the geophysical exploration advances in those techniques, but geochem's also been bounding along, and so some of those more regional data sets are really powerful these days, looking for the smell of those geochemical signature of those upflow zones. They're fairly distinct So I think you can zoom into the districts pretty quickly with that sort of data.
Yeah, we've often said that the geophysicists seem to get all the love in Australia in terms of these big data acquisition campaigns, but I think the time of geochemistry has certainly arrived to have similar sorts of campaigns. And amongst the chief geoscientists of Australia, where we're having discussions about the potential of that, if nothing else, to keep Scott Halley off our backs about the need for that work, but we actually get it. Is there any comments that any of the rest of the panel would like to make in that regard?
Yeah, I think, Phil, Kincora's history was exploring for porphyries in Mongolia, and we were able to seamlessly come to New South Wales with the existing team and work out where we wanted to be in the belt. Yep. Based on this data. The MinView is a fantastic tool. The London Dairy Core facility is a fantastic resource. Being able to leverage off all those learnings that previous explorers have invested that capital in, which is the property of the state and the people, hugely advances the lead time and focuses where you want to be, and it gets a much better return on capital. I think another key message, which you touched on before, is these cooperative funding grants, while they don't seem like necessarily a huge amount of money, what that says as New South Wales as an investment jurisdiction on a global basis is huge. That gets investors' attention, and it enables the private sector, particularly when the buoyant capital markets aren't there, which is the majority of the time, to take some risks that they wouldn't otherwise be able to do, test some of these new concepts, and ultimately the risk reward is huge. If a cooperative funding grant helps unlock a new discovery, that is a huge benefit to the state and the people. So I think in terms of that data and these grants, they're two things that we as Kincora have significantly benefited from, and we've seen that from our shareholder base as well.
Okay, thanks very much.
Yeah, and I would just, further to Sam's point on the data is prospectivity mapping. When we talked about the Rockley-Goulgong belt, that was based off a survey done with MinEx and the Geological Survey of New South Wales back in 2019. But integrating those data sets and putting them into formats that help bridge that gap between what the investors are looking for. Again, as part of our model, we also look at joint venture partners, but it just sort of brings it together into a format that helps us attract and secure that funding to allow us to then test those ideas and test that sort of model. So that's certainly something that we've liked from the survey in the past.
And we're just about to wind up here, but just one further question. Government promotion of exploration in New South Wales, or is the ARC at the point in the current market where it's just going to sell itself? Are we doing enough from the investment attraction and marketing point of view?
I definitely would say so. We're getting a lot of, and it has a real tangible impact from what we see,
right.
Not only in the share price, but the willingness to test ideas. We talk about critical minerals, but there's obviously, other elements as part of that as well. But, we've certainly seen, the reception to be really, really positive.
All right.
Hearing the Premier this morning, his statements were very strong.
Yep.
Investment, very much the message that we as an industry very much welcome. I guess using Anthony's example of the Golden Triangle as a comparable sovereign risk, geological terrain, landmass.
Yep.
I was updating some peer groups just yesterday. Over the last 6 months, you've seen the Golden Triangle exploration peers re-rate 1.7 times. Their market cap cumulatively is over 2 billion. In our part of the world, the Macquarie Arc, we've re-rated 2.5 times, but it's only $500 million cumulative market cap. Yeah. Peter's obviously done a great effort in terms of getting that market cap up, but in terms of a global perspective, we're doing well in New South Wales. We're catching up, but we're still behind other comparable jurisdictions.
Okay. Well, on those comments, I'd like to get the audience to thank our panel here today for those insightful comments about exploration in the Macquarie Arc.